Ye Let us cultivate the bodhicitta motivation, that is the altruistic aspiration seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should all engage in this teaching. Okay, what's the page number in volume number 3? Page number. Thanks to Pam, she took her book, so I am left stranded. I have the book, yeah. I don't know the page number. 179, thank you. So allow me to read a couple of passages from this great treatise on the stages of the path of enlightenment we call Lamrim Chemo, volume number 3 in your English translation, just to give you the blessing of oral transmission.
Rahi me tiki de jebe rebe ne ba me ba she ne ta ye ba de la ta le do ba ne me ba de do de la ta ni be she ba ni shu kan la yang she da no da ji ju shu ba zan yin je na to de lo da no ma zan yin no wo de tong ji yin ju de yin ju la de da zhe ba yin no yin no yin de mi je be she ba ma da ba ra ju ba na mo so di ni la ma ji be she ba she sha ta ba yin mi ji ba ni me no den ji bo ta ji be she ba la ji na she ba cha ba ta ra jo ge yin lu la che da yin che ni ju ba mi she ra ji de cha ba she sha wang yin bi di de she ba ni chu de lo ju ma ye dan je la mu mi she da shi ge ju la do jiang ji de be cha ba ma ji be she ba she sha chu de lo ma ji be ji de wo ko ni ji la ya ba me ro wo zhe de lo jo a la yang she da ta ni de cha ba ta ra mu de de ko na ta ra de ko na ni de ta ra ne ba ne什么些就吧写就老么不也讲第些吧大姐呢引就是等于这边些吧个引哈了个天天我记得找爸爸记得一面记得也给不出的等这话可能了这面积过去过节节嘛这边老人就对了记得这就把这边少把一弄希望得了这玩意那你们他你这边写着就把那么说连着等上那么了少不拍吧了嘛这玩意那么讲对吧的用了说别有的别写别这是的人就没个人没这边写吧然后了那玩意别这里也是我们别讲没到但你别怎么新鲜的吧你别弄他们了，对的，就娘把我都没给了说，娘们对这把你路了，现在有这把没别乱送啊，你们讲，第送的同了，他你们怎么那边得到，他也对我没把人弄让心愿没水现在这边，这边那把没把那他也对这边同他们他这边西边走过吧，走过讲。说因为最近的这边西边呢，那把我同学们那帮也把过节。日巴的也把嘛这把那让我日巴的也把这那让我也把这把一边他一边同一把给我一弄，提前日期见面的把他们提这把你这个说那个他呢都给的连着的都等。我觉得做了的都中完你那你们当面那面你们对这边老多给老多那边的，我就说的做的都叫我当给每个的都叫我一热心的最近的这边这边们这把松江，这边们这边们那不当这对没准备切肉，我了他我是学生去的来看见。但是当我这留住的了，融入天主面前留住的呢，可有那让些有个事，我到底刚才吃什么的些，但好像到底这不忙我就是刚刚吃啥的，有些些嘞，这边这你个当东西的你个是，对面的没多，现在第三章欧洲的，去那边欧洲些就做些的嘞，找到忙不有些叫吧打吧。我这当我这来就这个几百些，中国也不几百些了吧？当初这的没有几百些的，中国都是的，得拉的我是吧？他第一把干，他人路可是这中国嘛的是的，来的有的是那当中这你也没那要，他也得要的是，那欧洲都说那不给，他也得要嘛的是，是他的人路个他也得要不要这样个，他他那不就是呢？他也得要我的了，我他可是。同样这不，同这不在可是顺着送上过是吧？可是这是吧？现在我叫一年那他那边写完了长把一把这个是吧？长把是，但其他长把同的他那边什么些那把没把当时，我在过那就过有个长把就个偏多嘛呀，对那一对多呀什么些就过没把多呀呢偏多嘛是吧？这可能你了。这可能你老么让些人们最近的这边日本那边明白吧？现在他有的要办对了，知道了到吧？那没法对多少。我这他考虑融入的他这他也上的有些就给下去修考虑的修是吧？我他那有同的第三的上过。
somebody this one to them just semi man say the water.
La.
Somebody to them just semi man say the
어디?
somebody.
마다 참으면서 돈을 주지고 말다. 타집에 참아.
No. But somebody.
돈을 주지면 누워서 대코나 최근에 리베드와 메바셔야 되라. 들려야 타집에 참에 문제다. 돈돈 집에 참에 문제 니셔고.
No. Geshe read from the bottom of page 178 to the top of 180. Just to remind ourselves, the main kind of a point of contention around which we have seen debates between Prasangika Madhyamikas and the Buddhist schools of thought below Prasangika Madhyamika, which means Savatantika Madhyamikans and also the schools below. According to Savatantikan Madhyamikans, the other sub-school of middle way school, and the schools below that within Buddhism, they say that things exist intrinsically. Intrinsic existence, the Tibetan term is Rangshinji Duba, is what they think, it really exists. So things do exist, and they do exist intrinsically. And so therefore, some of the proponents of this particular philosophy, they say that, when we talk about the law of karma and its outcomes, results, yes, they do exist. But intrinsically, just like, similar assertions being made in non-Buddhist schools of thought, where some non-Buddhist schools would assert something called chiso, kind of a universal principle. It exists, intrinsically. Or that they talk about some kind of a permanent state of being called Ishwar. Okay? And so what we have really seen is, one of the things we talked about quite a bit is, Hoshang Mahayana's, the understanding of the middle way. And according to him, that, we need to put everything under the microscopic analytical analysis or rational analysis. And if they don't find under that analysis, which nothing is found under the analysis, then he said things really don't exist at all, And so his view of the nothingness is, as a matter of fact, a nihilist position, an annihilist position. He said ultimately nothing exists at all. When you put everything under the microscopic rational analysis, nothing is found. So what that tells us is nothing really exists. Okay? And so the point is, do as you please. And of course, Prasangika Madhyamikans have a big problem with that. And Prasangika Madhyamikan's position is that nothing exists intrinsically, which is antithetical to all other positions. Right? Others accept intrinsic existence. Prasangika is saying, no, things don't exist intrinsically, but that does not mean things don't exist at all. And they do exist conventionally. Okay? And so the Tibetan term is called Tanye de Yoba. Conventionally they exist, but they don't exist intrinsically. So now what is our understanding of conventional existence? Tanye de Yoba. Something exists conventionally, right? How can we, establish that? And 3 points are kind of taken into account. Number one, if something exists conventionally, it should be known to what we call a conventional perception. Okay, that's one criteria, right? If something exists conventionally, it must be known to some conventional perception. Okay. Number two, that no other valid cognition, right, should undermine its existence. No other conventional valid cognition should undermine its existence, shouldn't challenge it. Okay, number two. And number three, that it should not be in contradiction with even the ultimate valid cognition, with which we perceive and we realize emptiness or the ultimate nature of phenomena. Okay, so those are the three kind of a set of conditions or criteria we use in order to understand and establish what is conventional existence. Okay? Number one, it should be known to a conventional perception. Number two, that its existence should not be invalidated by other valid conventional perception. And number three, that it must not even be in contradiction with the ultimate valid cognition that perceives or establishes emptiness. Okay.
어디 다 동부 타니베 히발라 잡아서 타지베 히바스 그래서 데레시고 다르와 텔 타니베 히바는 쇼칼은 제다 나왔다 주스 쇼바자인 너요 돈이 로서 나왔다 있는 원디 돈이 인디 디다 줘봐 있는 냥디 제베 히바 마다번 줘봐 남소스 데레 간제 그래서 그것도 용자다 게 통해서 게 퇴서야 피도세 대도세야 게저 용자 줘라 어디 타지베 히바스고 어디 어들 제바 힘이자 그 말에 디 가르사다 오리 어디 시바저 디지 먼저 통해서야 디지 다 텔레 너지 니셔라 봐 가시 트위도 통하는 양 통해서야 디지 양양다 와서 통해서야 니셔라 봐 요새 지상고 타지베 히바스 텔레샤 봐 다 디시 다 디일 마제베 히바시 차에 딱바 이비시바도 많이 놓으시더잖아 어디 지당 마제베 히바 다 제바시세야 디건서 예 딱동전이 비게 애니 인세야 어디 제바 타두지베 리세야서와 어디 제바 시워버 제다비도 애니 메시 용게서 애니 코비 추진레베서 말에 레지레게서 인데 딱바 시조거라 어디 제바 시워 공루고 말아 그래서 베 건저베 레가르시 디드고 민두어세 칸바 약보레도 민두어세 또 디디 제바 텔레 디 제바 두고 말아 어디 딱바 이메시와 많이 세지라와 되는 직대방 타니베 시바시다 나와 잡아다 조게 인루라 시다이 제는 조바 멤베 직대기 잡아 시자와 인베 데다 시바네 루들로 요모에 탐지로 무에 신자시 유라 도경 직대베 잡아 마지베 시바시 차이 루들로 마지 직대버 건데 유라 요 메숭오스 셔다디 시바데 타지베 세마시아디 대세월다 이런 건조비게 줍대로 지금 메신게 다 간지 디데게 시바 주고 색을 말했어 줍대로 요모지 가리나 말이나 남자 디데죠 다 도미도 세야도 디데세데 미스유라 줍대로 유아유라 요난다 마주유라 요난다 간지 다 베나 레균데서도 에니라와 대둑 소도 디렉 남자 시야지 수규는 가가 찍어 두고 와. 어째다 디 에니 디타지비 시바세야 들이야 에니 루달로 뭐고 뭐 루달로 요라 레스타 건지 너드는 데리 건지 군조 유디 집에 시바 때려 와. 그 강갈 데 타지비 시바스고 와. 어디리.
So let's talk about each of these conditions that we set out in order to understand conventional, existence. The first one we said that if something exists conventionally, it should be known to conventional perception. Okay, so what does that really mean? What is conventional perception, if you will? Now, conventional perception basically refers to our everyday perceptions. We, the ordinary people, right? We hear things, we perceive things, we experience things. So that's the kind of conventional experience perceptions that we are, talking about. And of course, our perceptions are not necessarily correct all the time, right? We have correct conventional perceptions. We see things, correctly, and then we are confused and, make errors. So that all those we have to understand the distinctions. And so these kind of perceptions really exist in all human beings, whether we subscribe to any philosophical standpoint or not. In other words, whether we are philosophers or not doesn't matter. We all share conventional perceptions, and by our worldly conventions, we say, hey, now I changed the names, Geshe Tejin Chujing into name like, hey, Tenzin coming, right there. So then that's right. If you know Tenzin, you know he's coming or she is coming, right? Tenzin can be he or she. Okay. So these kind of conventions, conventional perceptions, they daily do not engage in the ultimate nature of things. Okay, and they do not do what we call ultimate analysis, or sometimes in your translation called rational analysis. Okay, they are not going to say, oh, what do you mean Tenzin? Who is that? His ear coming or nose coming? No, nobody says that. You just Tenzin is coming. You know Tenzin is coming. Okay, so such perceptions and experience exist in all of us, regardless of whether we buy into any philosophical schools of thought or not. That doesn't matter. And we all have some shared experiences of, let's say, if we do certain karmic actions, we experience certain kind of results. We do some other kind of karmic actions, we experience other kind of results, right? We all experience pleasures and displeasures, or sadness and suffering. So all of these things exist conventionally, and they are established by our conventional perceptions, okay? So these conventional perceptions really do not do ultimate analysis of things. Now, we are not saying that there is no such thing as conventional analysis, right? If we are building a house, right, we can talk about, hey, is this the right kind of a house you are looking for? I mean, is this the kind you like or not? Yeah, we can do that analysis, but that is not called ultimate analysis, or to use the word from this book called rational analysis, right? You can say, oh, no, that's not Tenzin, that's Sonam coming, right? That's okay, I mean, that analysis, but that's still not an ultimate analysis, okay? And so that is the first, what we call set of criteria. If something exists conventionally, Tanya de Yoba in Tibetan, it should be known to conventional perception, okay?
Thank the trouble that wounded the content that map Teta Meba now the Chita Tower to the Shabbat the Dalla the Da Tayizam wounded tea in Juliet that trouble young the journey to that Jeva tea round wood to be Raji Luxo, she and the Kelamba member the Dalla Raji Michi regret Jeva Charmate. Told that regret, Kizu the Mindibi Sheros, that did a gaje. Do the Lord you was in that, not the benefit. Do the was that, wrong you say, Samson was do the Lord you are Shagorova. She not conzo with Shaji Gangalene, doesn't change Shagomers, she was Shagorova, conzo, but Legion the Mindu said, Shado, any big top chair of Karistan, other tiny with Shivagang and Jideo Ranga, Shadachi, what conzo Drupal shall be sent, conzo lost Shadan Yomara. So that Kanga Chikbaris. There are, but did it Chikbaris? Karsa Chikbaris, Pendacaris and that Jeva, she should say there, that did it. But did look in the shape Mevana, when the tie in a long bush. Tandoa means till Jiva Dogoma, the Jig did Louis and the Louis Mara, the Tare to us, and did Jiva de Jiva Shivakong Dumara, or did Dragmaris, the Dama Jiva Tata, take on a Jiva said, Jiva Maris. Did Jiva take on the Jideranga, the Lord Joala Juayora, depending on the remedy of Jimmy here with Chagara. What is you?
So such conventional perceptions, what we see, what we hear, what we sense, those things are common experiences to all beings, regardless of whether we are philosophers of some kind or followers of certain kind of schools of thought or not. Okay? Even the philosophers or the followers of different schools of thought, such as Savatantika Madhyamikins or Chida Martin's Mind-Only School, when they talk about conventional reality, they have to talk like any other ordinary people, right? They are not going to put conventional phenomena other. They should not under ultimate analysis, right? They're not going to always test the ultimate nature of phenomena. They say, okay, conventionally, hey, did you hear that sound? You say, yes, what sound? You're not going to analyze into the deep ultimate nature of, things. And but the thing to remember here is when we talk at the conventional level, we're not saying that we don't do any kind of analysis on that level. There is a conventional analysis of some kind. But that is very different from ultimate analysis or very rational analysis that we use in the context of emptiness. Right? Conventional analysis would be something like if somebody say, hey, did you see the dog? Right? You say, no, that's not a dog, that's a cat. Well, that kind of differentiation analysis we have to make, but that does not mean it is the ultimate analysis, right? No, that's not a horse, that's a donkey, really. Okay? we can talk about that. If we can't do that kind of differentiation and distinctions, then we really can't talk about what is right and what is wrong, what is fair and what is unfair. We can't talk about those things. Okay? So that kind of conventional analysis is very different from the ultimate analysis we call Döndam Chöje in the context of shunyata or emptiness.
Jigde na thoma meva na thagbe thon kharsa. Ro men jigde na thoma meva na thagbe thon yin jang. Rigbe nebe na tanyi de meva ne marik be ngobo namla. Marik be ngobo namla rang ngo do tak bata. Jigde rang ngo chebe nga da nga yewan zebata. Khasan tering ban zeba so ji yunam yimbe. Jigde na thagba tamji omobe guzu de menos. Tire da 타지비 시발 작바세 될 지대고 농주 되려와 농주 손다 다 농주 되는 것도 그래서 근데 심지어 시바에 있는 쇼 가르나나 아니 로히 저번에 잡시고 와 대 지대는 다 타지비 시발 작바세 될 누구 그러지다 그래와 어디 잡아세 누구에서 어디 저도 타지비 시발 잡아 간가 어머베 타니 개랭 말이스 그래와 타니 요한테 타지비 시발 잡아세 타지 서머시 민도 도주지 되고 som상고도 와 어제도 뒤서나 이니 가르사 이니 가상의 드링이 먼저 때도 로히라다 다디 뒤딱 반증에 지러와다 어디 저서 어머면 누구 말이스 대시도다 이니 가르사 차세야 돼 지게는 되다 보겠다 용서 해주려 보시는 지대랑가 이제 파지도 그게 즉 통해서 통하는 이 여름에서 통하는 이 여름에서 뭐 통하는 이 여름에서 이 쓰고 말아 그거 들으실 수가 없다.
So the first point or the condition that we deal with to understand conventional existence is that if something exists conventionally, it should be known to conventional perception. Okay, and that's what we have discussed quite a bit right now. But everything known to conventional perception does not necessarily exist. Are you with me? If something exists conventionally, it has to be known to our conventional perception. But if something is known to conventional perception, it does not necessarily have to exist. You see the difference, the subtle difference, okay? Because as ordinary people, things appear to us as intrinsically existent or truly existent, okay? And so usually, that does not seem to matter when we talk about conventional phenomena, okay? Because we grasp at the intrinsic existence of things. Things appear to us in that way, but still we can talk about, there's a donkey going there, right? But not going to like, what do you mean? The donkey, just the way it appeared to me or does not appear to me? Nobody's going to get into that dialogue, right? We say, I know what donkey looks like, and there's a donkey going, okay? But intrinsic existence does not exist. It may be known to the worldly people. Worldly people may not be able to differentiate between intrinsic, non-intrinsic, but intrinsic existence does not exist. See? So everything known to conventional perception does not necessarily exist. But if something exists conventionally, it has to be known to conventional perception. So that's quite a difference, okay, the distinction between the two. Okay? Otherwise, we may run into the problem of not being able to differentiate between different things. For example, if somebody thinks yesterday was today, well, now you have a permanent sense of time, isn't it? Because yesterday is past, today is new, isn't it? But if you think yesterday is today, well, your time got messed up, isn't it? So you didn't make a distinction between yesterday and today, right? It's just a one stage of time for you. And that kind of a perception to conventional thought is a wrong perception. Okay?
가지 숙자소당 무디게 다바는 타이에디 예메 미즈베 기제데 nga마는 직된 탐지를 잡아다 치마 주다 마 코나라 잡이 체로 시마와 네 베마와 나르게다 니레고르와 시마와 네 넘버 마지바인데 헤드는 타이에도 숙소 기마다부 임바 메고라 라응오 저바 요고바 주에 joa so manglas ta khaji siddhana ene 속도 속자라 서서 가서 여바 뒤서 여바다 모두 다 딱바다 이지조스 매베 켜와 가래세나 속자된 지대 용도 타고 그래서 다 지조다 이제 다 딱바세야 돼 르다마 코나 타거면서 지 다음에다 군이 타니 예미 켜와 드려도 그래서 드려라는 tin 지금 말이서 그러와 대이나 이 속자서 다다 이 라히 주바데 간도 지대 용도 난 차디고 그러와 저다 그 수주는 라히 주바나 이차로 시차다 대이나 이 최다지 이마다 지대 장수시 최다지 이마다 인식 말아 시다 대시 디다시 인자 이 대이나 속자서 라히 주바다 디가사 이마다 우세야 디 매바다 속자서 라히 주바 디데 레루도 느지 뭐보 용도 지대 차 nga마디 지대 차 뭐볼 차와 세그레스라와 시마드다 마코나 제 차바이나 다다다 라기 주바데 몽볼 차와데 레루도와 디레서 인디게데 메와 지마타 부세야데 메와 레루디 테그 마레서 다가지
So then a critic raises a point, an argument here. So it says that so if if you say that the how should I say the essential objects such as form, sound, and smell, they exist because they are conventionally known to the worldly people, or they are known to conventional perceptions. Okay, then we also need to accept things that are accepted in certain philosophical traditions, such as the universal principle, okay, or such as that self is a permanent entity, partless permanent, because those things are known to those bunch of guys. I shouldn't say guys, those people. And so it would be same, but the Pasangikas, said, no, that's not the same thing. Okay? In different schools of thought, philosophers or the followers of philosophers, they may buy into certain constructs, isn't it? Universal principle is a construct. Okay? Permanent, partless self is a construct. So these philosophers and followers might buy into that, but that doesn't mean those things exist. Okay? We are talking about what is known to most of the people, so to speak, right? When we talk about form, smell, touch, right? Regardless of whether we are philosophers or not, we all experience those. We all have shared experience, so therefore we say those things exist. Okay? Whereas things like universal principle, things like the permanent, partless entity, those are not known to us existing. Those are known to people who are in that school of thought. So that's a different matter. We have to distinguish between them. And also, we are not saying that if something is not known to the conventional perceptions, then those things don't exist. Okay? We said if something exists conventionally, it has to be known to conventional perception. But we did not say that if something is not known to the conventional perception of the worldly people, it does not exist. For example, right, things don't appear to us as an illusion. Okay? But that does not mean illusion doesn't exist. Okay? Things appear to us as intrinsically existent, truly existent, okay? But they don't appear to us just like an illusion, just like a mirage. They don't. Okay? So we have to be really able to understand the fine distinctions of the things we're talking about. If something exists conventionally, it is known to, has to be known to conventional perceptions. But everything known to the conventional perceptions does not necessarily have to exist. And if something does not appear to the conventional perception, it does not mean it doesn't exist. See, we are dealing with a whole lot of, fine distinctions here. Okay?
Rigpa Chujim Rigpa Chujim said, Gobaldor Rondre. They are changing on the developers of the Vakayim, but the Gunzo young Dani that Gobo number Meneba in Baji Shero, changing Maloba, the Dungelas of it in Zembati. Over the Gunzo de Dani Terry Yavani Sherry, Tanso he, both Jigdena, Tumu the Trajan. The Terenzemba Gunzo di Chinjilo di Shelas, Metaso he won Jidin Gunla Mata Jang Terenzemba, Shinji Maloma Song so, they can't do the Lojo here, what Dungel de Wazeba, Metabala was that mother that was 매장을 장한지 봐 힘을 내기 로저 해요 봐
No.
어디 대화라 소바세 디체 건지 디 직대가 다 근데 상지 지도는 비게 탈베 람때야 때셔도 다 디주 가가는 뭐 용자 건설 가르 에네 가서 동일 대화다 매장 장한지야 간가 요야 되러 봐
No.
어디 쓰고 다 가지 동일 대화 시대는 코에 비게 대화도 상지 대화도 쓰고 봐
No.
어디 뒤에 가가 있는 지기는 용어서 용자게 비게 대화다 지고 더다 수지는 디세도 가르사 그래서 대단히 우리 인터넷 저 타이 저네 대다시 봐 대랑 우저 인이비 로서 시에니 켈 가서 가서 고와인 바 지기 켈 현재로 능일로서 봐 예디 고보고도 다이디 여바이 비치데 딱소 시보 지디 투보도 차자 지디 당 뒤에 가는 지대나 에네 능일 대화다 에네 가서 다 메발 다 주바시 메타블 딱바시 미장과 장아 지고 건수 가가베 데려와 미장과 장아 시디 장다 코에 동행을 비게 비게 건수 연대다 저 말에 그래와 근데 소소 류자시 뭐 장마다 그래와 류군에서 류도 미장을 해야 봐 어디서디 지대 용자 진짜 그래스 이는 돈다 가르서 신주로 시보다 지대군라 차 양스 된점 봐 신주로 송 신주로 버 송소스 상제게 에네 지대는데 미장 장아 지고 상제스는 에네 가래 상제 답지 도가시 가르스 데 샤르와 가르사 디다 디기테레 어사 가르사 디 슈탐지 동기 다음에 봐
양을 되셔서
양을 더 쇼 미장과 장 데로 디 장데로 장와시 미장과 장 제바 동해의 대완 제바 다도 말아 다도 제바 제바 딱 다시 장데시 딱다 싫어
알겐티 손으로 뒤제 탐지 메다 봐.
네 가지 네 뭐게 장세도 장데다다 미장 장 제바 동해 대완 제바시 에네 다도 말아 다도 제바 장데 미다 딱반 제바 히드와 어디 직대는 다 건도 농주도 들리나 어딘지 건도 다 가지 이제 용자가 된지 거라 이는 상지기 엔 시제로 송샤스 이와 다음에와 당 메다바다 동요마다 에네 가르사 에네 메자마 디게 상지기 디야 시제 뭐 내지니스도 가래 동해 기조도 다 디 기조 히도 거라 이와티 신조로 다다 짱다다 시조로 마이나 디 롱조 히보디 양타와 레고 말바 어제 상지기 송쇼리스 지데 농도 신는 콘조 히보디 어디 당거디 상지기 될 도니 디에 간가 신조로 인스 인 메자마 마이디 코에디 쇼도 간가 메자마 레스도 송샤스 거다
So we're still discussing the condition number one, that if something exists conventionally, it has to be known to conventional perceptions. Okay? But everything known to the conventional perception does not necessarily have to exist or has to be correct. Okay? For example, we, the ordinary people, receive many, things appear to us incorrectly in many ways. And in the context of Four Noble Truths, particularly the truth of suffering, when we talk about its characteristics, because each of the four, the truths has four attributes of characteristics, so there are 16 attributes of the Four Noble Truths. Yeah? And so when we look at that, we understand that often things appear to our ordinary conventional perceptions incorrectly. For example, number one, we perceive that which is what we call in the suffering nature as something pleasurable. That's one of big misconceptions, isn't it? Something that is contaminated, diluted, and in the nature of suffering, we might see it as something wonderful, okay, pleasurable, okay, and something that is impermanent, we may perceive that as being permanent, unchanging, and something that is, empty of self, but we perceive that as having the nature of self, okay, and something that which is unclean as being clean. So things might appear to us incorrectly. For example, this body, if you really look even conventionally at its nature, it consists of many what we call impurities, contaminated elements. But yet, we just think our body is just, one clean, wonderful entity. Okay, so we got it all wrong. And so things appear to us incorrectly. But then how do we know this incorrectly? Because, when we rely upon Buddha's perceptions, and then what Buddha said is everything appears to us is incorrect. Because Buddha said everything that's in samsara, the contaminated things, suffering, is not really pleasure, but it's in the nature of suffering. Right? Samsara is in the nature of suffering, not in the nature of happiness. Yeah, Buddha teaches us that. And so everything that is produced is impermanent, is transitory. Although we think they appear to us permanent, but Buddha said everything that's produced is impermanent. Okay, one of the four seals, as we know. Yeah. And all phenomena, everything that exists is empty and selfless. Right? That's what Buddha taught us. And nirvana is the state of peace. So Buddha teaches us that how things appear to us incorrectly. So if we understand the correct nature of things, then we can free ourselves from the state of samsara, isn't it? So long as we have those misconceptions and misapprehensions, then we are stuck in samsara. But as we understand the correct nature of things, then we are able to exit or get out of samsara.
다 니께자 다다 가만히 키고서 데려발래. 당기 가지게 이니 온주소 탄예도 매바다. 속자도 탄예에 도도 그래서는 가마데 인데 지당을 차버리. 심마 조다마 거 차리 뒤치기를 나와. 제가 다 지당 차버리 있는 예배 켜고 멀지 뒤주제 동도 거라. 어디 동라데 어디 동도 거다. 근데 먹었는데 가르쳐야 되는서.
So the point of contention that these things relate to is you have the critic, raises the issue, said, what? Well, if you say that things known to conventional perceptions, that's how you verify conventional existence, then he said there is no difference between form, sound, and smell, etc., which appear to the conventional perceptions, and the universal principle and a permanent self, partial self, which are known to the philosophers of different schools of thought. So because those are known, so they should be, same. And so the Prasangika Madhyamika say no. Everything known to the conventional perceptions does not necessarily be correct and exist. Okay, so the examples given are these, four misperceptions we have about the contaminated things in samsara. We see that which is in the nature of suffering as pleasurable, or it appears to us as such, that which is impermanent as permanent, that which is empty of self as having self, and so samsara is a beautiful place to be, in a situation to be in, and so that's the point we're trying to make here.
대다 풍부 메타버 손진베 똑바니 너희를 추양 예빈 진단 세면내와 메비 신제 말로방 머지바 예차라 ông khi mà nó là truy sinh mà truy xa hiện maybe mà truy hiện mới giàu sự đó là sáng chế cái này chỉ đến nó còn xem chế cái năng lượng được hiện na nó tăng tới tăng tới hiện sáng chế tăng tới bởi mấy ta bởi phá sử dụng mà đi xuống đó đó đi tới mấy ta bởi cái gọi là sẽ tới mấy ta xuống trên bên tóc bát cái gì chỉ ta nói là truy rồi có răng hiệu cho năng gọi là nó còn zindan thế là còn đi Any metabada da me waten zindan zindan chuyo maris. Rewa. Sida lo yang da ba re se rewa. Ta ongbu hiwa ne no le chu xing mo zhu xiang ga ya me be mo zhu xie me zhao da di ong xi le de se da no yu da ju yu se na lo xia ge什么rewa. Ji ba xia rewa. Sida go chu se na da to yu jing mo xia ma rewa. Do ba no yu da xing ni xia go rewa. Wo di chi ba zhu.
So once again, now you look at you will be capable of that.
La really, only that chat have you to say there.
No. So things may appear incorrectly to our worldly perceptions or conventional perceptions, such as the examples we just gave, that which is impermanent as being permanent. And so to understand that kind of idea, if you will, we also need to understand what called the different types of perceptions that we experience in our everyday life. Okay, according to Prasangika mathematics, all the ordinary perceptions are mistaken in that things appear to our perceptions as being intrinsically existent, but they don't exist that way. Okay? Nonetheless, we can talk about valid, ordinary perceptions. So there's no problem for the Prasangika to say that our perceptions are mistaken, but at the same time, we can also have valid perceptions. Okay? And so in the case of what we call conceptual perceptions, tokpa in Tibetan, conceptual perceptions are mistaken with regard to their appearances, appearing objects, okay? But they are valid with regard to their, what we call the referent objects. So that we have to understand that, for the conceptual, for example, let's say, Buddha said that everything that is produced is impermanent, okay? And so we have, let's say, we are able to generate the correct perception of that which is produced as impermanent, okay? Still, that conceptual perception is mistaken with regard to its appearance. Why? Because that thing is still appearing to us as intrinsically existent, okay? Whereas it doesn't, right? But our conceptual perception is correct or valid in the sense that it is seeing that which is produced as being impermanent. Are you with me? So it is mistaken with regard to its appearing object, but it is not mistaken. It is, as a matter of fact, correct, valid with regard to its main object, the referent object. Do you see the difference? Now, in the case of what are called the non-conceptual sensory perceptions, okay, visual consciousness, whatever, if they are mistaken to the appearances, they are also mistaken with regard to their main objects. Because in the case of non-conceptual sensory perceptions, in a sense, there is no difference between appearing object and the referent object. They both seem to be the same. Okay? If it is mistaken to the appearing object, then it's also mistaken to its referent object. So that is the difference between non-conceptual perceptions and conceptual perceptions. Are you with me so far? Okay.
sungye sheshin zibe anji tinyi ganga ini chiwa yinpa da jikwa resi rwa ina jikde chawzo de ne jikde chawzo shena ini sungye di sheshi ma rwa jikde zima zho to rwa ta pumba de kawan jiba da su sugran zibe lo de de take chi ne wa me da de yang ta na da ryo si jikde de jo rwa sheta jikde ni le de ne ini sungye na anji yu de je wa de ini lobe gunzo she Suktrasa na yang shi yu de jeba de ini yang da gunzo jigdeng de ni sha go res ta oma ba ribe he ne de ko ni le yang da zhe ba yo ma de jigdeng de ni yang da yo ba wo de yi se go.
So from the vintage point of ordinary perceptions, we may be able to talk about what we call the Yangda Kunzop. This way I struggled last time, is the correct conventionality and incorrect conventionality, Yangda Kunzop and Lokpa Kunzop. The Lokpa Tibetan literally has a sense of falsity, something not correct, false, and Yangda is correct or, perfect in a sense. And so regardless of the terminology difficulties, the sense is that the essential objects that we experience are experienced as what we call correct conventionality, because we don't see that the forms appear to us as intrinsically, but they don't exist that way. We just see the form and we think that's how it is. Okay, so this, from our perception, it is a correct perception, correct conventionality. But in the case of the reflection of a face in the mirror, okay, that appears as a real face, but we know it is not a real face, isn't it? So that is what we call, we the ordinary people can see, that is the incorrect conventionality. Because we know what? Yeah, that's just a reflection. That's not the real thing, isn't it? Whereas with the everyday form, smell, sound, we don't have the same experience. We think like, oh no, that's appearing me in this way and they don't exist. We don't have that perception. Okay? But according to Prasangikas, they don't make such distinction as Yangda Kunzop or correct conventionality or the Lokpe Kunzop, the false or the incorrect conventionality. Prasangikas don't make such distinction. They said only from ordinary vintage point we could talk about those things.
풍부 딱발라서 번제비 똑벤지다 유네 타이데 maybe 고바 뉴게 메타바서 번제비 유네 타이데 예비 리베가와 미누소 시데다 로강가 텐교디 게자 용가 가르세나 너도 소지 타면 유로강가 취재 인식어 봐. 다 취재 있는 강가 찍바리고 로기도 강가 찍바리고 이거 말해서 그게 너희 트레이너래 가지 두유여도 가지 매딩이 들어 먹어요 봐. 셰도다 인 델스가 와서 풍벌라서 와데 인 랑생이 저 랑시 저반 지기 로디 디유도 고 토고요 레스와 다 숙단집에 로디 유도 고 리베 고야요 말봐 다 숙자 덴버 저반 집에 랑시 저반 집에 로디 인 리베 고니 그레스 그 뜻이거 가버 가르사 타지 고버 뉴장스 메타바서 반 집에 유네 타니 유에베 리베 가버 미뉴소 세와 그 트리에 맞지 버디 지기 신유도 ini riba gato doa ranghi chuban jinge dela ta pungbo meta ban jinge de ko pungbo ranghi chuban mena pungbo meta ba yo ba shide ko ga ni mar ba ko yo de ba ko ni chuhi ba jigba ina 가지 그 돈 내줄 가 가지고 와
no so no. So according to Prasankhya mathematicians or Tenjurba in Tibetan, all of our ordinary perceptions are mistaken in that things appear to us as intrinsically existent, but they don't exist in that way. Yes, I would already said, in that sense, our perceptions are all mistaken. But then that does not mean that we do not experience any valid perceptions, okay? Or that does not mean there is no difference between wrong views and our ordinary perceptions. Okay, we still could make a distinction between them, because when we look at our own perceptions are very complex. That sometimes certain perceptions we have are mistaken with regard to the appearances, but they are not mistaken with regard to the actual objects or something. Other times, we think something exists, but it doesn't exist at all. We are just clinging to something that doesn't exist at all. Okay, so the thing to remember here is, for example, form, sound, smell. These ordinary experiences appear to us as intrinsically existent. Okay, by the use of the logic or rational analysis, we can refute, intrinsic existence of form, sound, smell. Okay? But through logical reasoning, we cannot refute the existence of form, sound, smell, etc. Do you see the difference? By using rational analysis, okay, or logic, reasoning, we can refute the intrinsic existence of form, sound, smell, taste, etc. But we cannot refute the existence of form, sound, smell, etc. through logical reasoning and rational analysis. That's a very big distinction, right? We have to get right. And, for example, just like form, sound, smell appear to us as intrinsic existence, for example, aggregates, form appear to us as intrinsic existence, but we may apprehend the form as being impermanent entity. Are you with me? Okay, and so in this particular case, through rational analysis and reasoning, we can establish that form does not exist intrinsically. So we can refute the intrinsic existence of form, but we cannot, refute the form itself, because the form itself exists and it is perceived as impermanent. That is the correct perception. You see how complex our perception is? We are looking at form. we see it as intrinsically existent or appear to us as intrinsically existent, but we understand it as impermanent. So through rational analysis and logic, we can refute the intrinsic existence of form, but we cannot refute the form itself. Why? Because you can't. Form exists, and it is understood or perceived as impermanent, and that is a correct perception. No.
Tong Tamaram, Rangu Trebe, Tangso Hi Missiba Kedu, and the thing is Trebe, Metaz Hia Missibe, the Konala, Tene, Ge Yuber, Ge Yuban Zemba Bala, Chinjo Lomal, Nayame Balagoni, so Tameta Tang, Dedu Tang. Da yeme khanle jone tsemale jeba songso sheda tisi wada ene jida de ene tangso hiwa de yo ma ba
No.
ro da thong da be cheba jana da ma jana da khanje da ba da ene di mezang ma zang wa zi yo ma ba
No.
ene di hiwa de tayi li men de thong da ba yo ma de me ba hian du ene mi se ba hian di ni zu trebe me da so yem da thong da ba rang wo trebe ene meta so yo ma ba jida meta so hide yo ba是吧也的同等把这个meta so hi yo ma是吧o ti me gon ta di ge ba ke ma jong ro ba ta jida ta so hi ta ni me ba na hi同等把这个me so de ta ni yo ma是吧是ko ta ni me ni chong ro ba ti chong yin da ene do le ta ngo zu chu lo de yo ba do hi jin do de yo ro so ko chen chen ma ji de so da ba ji chen ma ji de me da chen chen ma ji de se de yo ma de o ti de le gon song go de se wa ta
So earlier we talked about how, we the ordinary people perceive that which is in the nature of suffering as blissful or pleasurable, that which is, impermanent as being permanent, that which is unclean as being clean, okay, and so that which is devoid of self as being having self. Okay, so those are all incorrect appearances, incorrect perceptions. Okay. Conventionally speaking, they don't exist at all. Okay. Conventionally speaking, suffering is not blissful. Okay, it doesn't exist that way. Conventionally, we don't have to use the emptiness logic. Conventionally, suffering is suffering. Suffering is not blissful. Okay. Conventionally speaking, that which is impermanent, permanent doesn't exist. So it doesn't exist. So conventionally speaking, those four things don't exist at all. Are we clear with one thing? Okay, keep that in your mind. Now, my second point. Now we also say that form, sound, smell, taste, all of those things don't exist intrinsically. Okay? So conventionally, there is no such thing as truly existent form, truly existent sound, truly existent taste, and all of those things. So in that sense, the point we make earlier, the later, they are just same, isn't it? Conventionally, right, impermanent things are not permanent. And conventionally, there are no intrinsically existent forms and sounds. So in that sense, they are just the same. Are you with me so far? No.
The Hajang Ganje, that Chu Kadel Samotana, in Telia, Koa Chingi Rigor said, or Kong the Tango, Metawa Juna, Samuel Julara, said that the get 60 conscience, though they judge in Kong Tangos, what the yet on desert on
So the point is, like in sutras, when you look at that, some of the expressions that are being used is, some like analysis applied to the form sound like that. So when you don't understand what it actually means, then you have a misunderstanding. Just like it said that Hoshang Mayana, he collected like 80 different points like that from the sutras. He said, you know what? Really nothing exists at all. Look at all this word Buddha used. He said, whether you do, whether you analyze things correctly or incorrectly, it doesn't matter, because you are entangled in the thought processes. You are still bound. Does it matter whether the gold chain binds you or the rusty chain binds you? You are bound. So he said there's no such thing. Point of engaging in even correct thinking, conceptualization, incorrect concept, because both are equally bind you. And why? He said, look at these things. So he collected like 80 different theses or expressions from sutras to make his point. So that's how he came to the philosophy of nothingness. He said the best thing is don't do anything, then you will be free. If sometimes you do something good, something bad, you are bound. So don't do it.
Rodi doi tsixing de yorba karsa ene sug metawa jona tsema jo mo su rangyi chwe khiwa jame de kodi khiwa jago marwa da de ngone so jene rangyi chwe sug metawa jon tsema jo la mo de do sug metawa da da me jon tsema jo la go marwa de di tsixing me da de hayang kongxia zhuo zi xi marwa.
So sometimes with expressions, such as things that so if you analyze the form, then you're analyzing it what we call ultimately. But there has to be some understanding which is a missing point. The things that if you analyze whether a form exists intrinsically or not, then that is the ultimate analysis. But if you don't, you could still conventionally analyze a form, but that's not the same as ultimate analysis. Okay? So that's why sometimes in the sutras, there are expression statements, if we miss the first, whatever, the overarching point being made somewhere, so then the thing is not repeated, then we started to lose the sense of the statements, and then we get the wrong notions.
Kata tine karsa chongso kete ngobo na la ranghi drondo be marik be zindan rikbe suyin jemba ta taji be tono mingo ba ge de jugba le temu ranghi de kunzo de ga jema de ba kunzo de theba ti song de he sukta so marik be ang kunzo de ba joba sung be shero he na kyo me de stati halo do this is da ranghi theba me na in kunzo dema se de ranghi chiban zibe lo kunzo dema sha to demu ranghi de kunzo de sha to ranghi chiban zibe lo ngo yoba sha mo de kunzo dema sig na sig da dil kare se na kong ngo dema jo kunzo sho mo tanye de be yo sa de da tanda kunzo dema shi be den se tanye in de kha ga ro da yoba kunzo tanye de ye se kunzo dema se de tanye be cheme to kunzo dema sig ro 다 지도 군접 대에서 가고 대번 줘서야 되라 이니 지도 대바 메인다 다 대야 수고 되거스 딘징고 대바 인자 대바스고 대베 다때 뭐 대바 요 말봐 다디 가지디 sab디살다 군접 대바 딘 줘서데 이니 딘징고 샤고도 시다 딘징고 군접 대바 샤고이나 이니 딘징 유디 리베가 얘기를 봤어 군접 대바 요라 봤어 딘징 요 말봤어 어디 겨도 쓰고라 어디 그 구조라지 좀 대바 군접디 테바티 송데세 오만지고 롱디 장니 어디 공차고라 그래서 코하 로자데 뜻어다 군접도 여바지업에 군접 대다 군접 대바시 가고 대바지 군접이 가가이 마마시에서 군접 대바 정사되다 타이도 군접 요새 요사니 마시에서 띵저바 용거라.
So we're on page 182, right on the top. One of the issues that some of the critics have experienced is they thought that conventional phenomena is established from the vantage point of ignorance, ignorant grasping. Okay. And because there are certain explanations, we say that certain things might appear to be true for certain perceptions, but in reality they are not true. Yeah? And the example is how things might appear as intrinsically existent to our ignorant perception, but in reality there is no intrinsic existence. So it is a truth for that perception, but in reality it's not a truth at all, isn't it? Yeah? So some critics thought that conventional existence is established from that vantage point. If that is the case, then they said that if you use the rational analysis and reasoning and you refute intrinsic existence, then you are going to refute the whole conventional phenomena. Okay? I think they're missing the point, because the way we establish conventional phenomena is not necessarily from the vantage point of ignorant grasping, but from the conventionality point of view, the worldly conventions. That's why we started to talk about those 3 points, isn't it? Something that's known to the conventional perception, something that's not invalidated by another valid conventional perception, that it is not in contradiction with even the ultimate valid cognition that deals with emptiness. So those are two different perspectives. We have to keep them separate.
Tati lend jo me de sukja so kunza demba jogba demba ni sambe angi demba in las. The sambe angi demba se kunza jida demba san me se orwa demba choba. Jida kunza demba se sambe angi se na samba se denzi ji rwa. Denzi ngor demba in za ni kunza demba se la re se rwa. Samba de denzi de shagge be ranghin do do be mari be ngor demba in nos. So thongla de ayo mar dita denzi ngor demba in kunza demba se la rwa. Then nimoji mari ba pang be dajuma ni dang sa jeva yin ji changsen na la ni na de da jeme rang yin ye demba ne mai de demba ngomba lomba me be shero he denzi meba nang la kunzo zang zu sung be yuzin de ti inos o de jedo de kunzo demba se ya o de densa de le in denzi ngo sha gres jedo ti sha yi da dan de nimoji mari ba dajba se de dajba ni se de ni ran dajba ni de ra sa jeva yin ji changju se ba she nyung sa jeva nyung bang ro ra se di khasa sumbo di ngol la ni chue tham ji be de kro ta phuma ka wa zo any big Zumbari mother, Demba Mariso, Yagunza Deva mind the Sego Marta, Chisago Guza Deva Dizing was shot, the Queen of Deva de Grava. Kunzung yet in the Jumer on him, Demba Zario Maris. That Demba Sorikas, that Antoni Mado to Deva Shagora, Kunzung Deva Shag Maris. Kadira Kadol, this one, Deva Gombal maybe, and the Kunzos said Deva Gombal maybe. In Demba Marino, Guza Dema Marino, Sergio. Chito Guza Dema Marino, Vesio over that. Demba Marino.
So we talk about two truths. Conventional truth we call Samvritta Satya in Sanskrit. And the ultimate truth, Dandam Demba in Tibetan called Pramartha Satya. And so the conventional truth is established as a truth from the vantage point of ignorant grasping. Okay? And so it is truth in the eye of that perception, grasping, but in reality it's not the truth per se. Okay? Let me explain this with some examples here. For example, can you not touch on the Sumbi? You're not touching about the Sajib, just some Sumbi again.
Oh, Sajiva is
you're not touching on For example, Arahats or the Arahants of hearer's vehicle, Sharvaka, and Pratika Buddha, solitary realizers, as well as the Bodhisattvas on the eighth spiritual ground called Bhumi. Okay, that means those who are completely free of delusions, afflicted emotions. Okay. These, let's say individuals, if you will, realized beings, for them, conventional phenomena appear as like an illusion, not as a truth. I mean, for their perception, conventional phenomena do not appear as truth, conventional truth, I should say, but they appear as like an illusion. Why? Because they are free of the delusions. So now we say, then how do we know? How can we establish conventional truth? Well, the conventional truth is established from the vantage point of us ordinary beings, who have ignorant grasping. So conventional truth is a truth for us, but in reality it's not a truth per se, because it's not a truth for the highly realized beings, because things are like an illusion. Do you see the difference, perception? Yes.
Oh, that is a penna, this is a job of Mende. Karsa, teaching Sujaso, they Sujaso. Dembati Maribe Ngu Yinjang, Suktaso Maribe, Job Mugoti, Joba made the pen Taba Rizin Lo Hiji, 탁바 르니 로히 용어나 탁바 르인장 로히티 탁바 넘버 좀 멤버 해노 세르바다 에데 탁바 르이마데 탁바 르디 에니 로티 조고르와
No.
이나 에네티 카르사 탁바 르디 로디 탁바 조고마르바 고 탁바 도고마르바 고 로히르바 어제 데지바 레스 군도 데바게 덴사디 덴질이 샤그레디 세나 군도 데바 유사디 덴질이 샤그마레스
No.
어디스
So when we say that forms, for example, are established as conventional truth, okay? So forms as conventional truth is established from the vantage point of ignorant grasping at intrinsic existence. Are you with me? But the form itself, its existence is not established from that same vantage point. Do you see the difference? The form as conventional truth is established from that vantage point because form appears as conventional truth for that perception. But in reality, it's not a truth per se because other realized beings see it as illusion. Are you with me? But the form itself is not established by the ignorant grasping. Okay? The example is here. Say somebody who thought that in a dark corner there is a coiled rope, right? And this guy thought, oh my God, there's a snake over there. See that? Okay. So that coiled rope as a snake is established by what perception? That person's perception. Because that person says, oh my God, there is a snake, cobra. Are you with me? But the rope itself, the rope exists, isn't it? The existence of the rope itself is not established by his perception. Because his perception is incorrect. His perception is he did not see that as a coiled rope. He saw that as a snake. Do you see the point? Same thing. So that is the example. We illustrate how forms as conventional truth is established from the vantage point of ignorant grasping, but the form itself is not established by the ignorance. Yeah, just like that coiled rope as a snake is established by this misperception by the XYZ. Okay? But the rope is not established from that vantage point because that perception is incorrect, right, with regard to the rope. I know, we are dealing with subtle issues.
당기 디카르사 타니베 세메 미노바다 테코나이 리베네와면서 요 딘 세계지 휴고 있어. 다 딘 대샤게로. 세메 누에서 지던데 대치고로 다 가지. 다 탁바 류스데 샤게 당고바 유세면서 류도 삼나 파칠 타니 버리 주마지 반 류마이 하고 그러와. 세다 디시도 당보 탁바 류레서 로디 타비기 틸레 류마이 하고 그러와. 어디 누에서 그러다. 그 탁바 류도 진도로. 타고 류마이 또로와. 그 누에서 그러와. 어디 누에서 그러다. 다 동동주의지야 디양 동답을 동동주의지 로디기 그 탁바 류마이 또 인서 진짜 로디기 탁바 류반지 단다 로 양다 탁바 류마이 또로와. 신도에서 그러와. 다 들을 동동주의 리베 누가 말 그래서 동동주의 리바디 동의도 그러면 이제 탁바 류마이 또 말봐. 어시다 디 코너사 가가래 봐. 다 런신이 맞아 봐. 주바텔라 양 동동주의 리바디 누구 주발 누구 그러면 타니베 세면 누구 말봐. 타니베 세마 인 동의도 소 말봐. 세다 그 뉴유도 가가래 거다. 그 숨샤가 이제는데 정말지 누상 가가도 와. 탁바 류든지 몰라 될 동동주의 로디 누구 말 간지. 어디
So Geshe would like to kind of provide what my professor would say, executive summary of the things we're talking about today. So we said that in order to establish that something exists conventionally, three conditions are to be met. One is that it has to be known to conventional perception. We talked quite a bit about that. That it must not be invalidated. Actually, the Tibetan word says it must not be harmed by, by another conventional valid perception. And the third point is that it must not be, invalidated by ultimate valid cognition that analyzes emptiness. Okay, so he wanted to summarize that point. So what do we mean by harmed by, another valid cognition or invalidated by? For example, in the case of a coiled rope that appears as a snake, Now that perception can be contradicted or invalidated by another valid perception, isn't it? Because person says, you know what, let's go, check out, is that a snake or not? And then you see, no, it's not a snake, it looks like a snake, coiled like a rope, but it is a rope. See that? So that valid perception of it is a rope, it harms or invalidates the earlier perception that, oh my God, there's a cobra there. Are you with me? That's what we call. Yeah. Now, the perception of that as a rope is not invalidated by ultimate valid cognition. Why? Because ultimate valid cognition doesn't need to apply analysis to that. That's a conventional phenomenon. Ultimate valid cognition deals with emptiness. Okay? So therefore, it does not contradict that. So therefore, we say that thing as a rope exists conventionally because it fulfills those three conditions. Are you with me so far? Yeah. In the case of intrinsic existence or inherent existence, okay, if we think that things exist intrinsically, then it is invalidated or harmed by ultimate valid cognition. Because ultimate valid cognition can put it under microscopic analysis. Okay, so how do they exist intrinsically? When you analyze it, you don't find it. So that means it does not exist intrinsically. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. It does not exist intrinsically. So therefore, it really cuts through, isn't it? Yeah. But the ordinary sensory perceptions, the valid ones, they do not contradict this. Why? Because ordinary valid perceptions do not engage with emptiness or the intrinsic nature of things. So those are different worlds, they deal with different objects. So those are the things we need to keep in our mind in order to understand when we say that something exists conventionally, and how do we know conventional truth, if you will. Yeah, no. So Geshe, I would like to stop there today, and we would like to welcome your questions. And we have a mic over there traveling.